that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder hope gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. This is George Harvey and Tom Fennell, and the show you're watching is Energy Week with George Harvey and Tom Fennell.
Got the right hand this time.
Did you? Okay. Every day I go to the internet and I find news and I record it at the articles, 10 to 15 articles that I like the best about energy and global warming at geoharvey.wordpress.com, which is my blog. And we get together and do the most interesting of the week in this show, and that's what the show is about. So
the best of the blog. The
best of the blog. That's what it is. Okay, so let's start. We're starting on Thursday, March 12th, which is a week ago. Today being the day that we're recording, whatever that is.
Thursday.
It's Thursday. It's always Thursday when we record, but today is the 19th.
Correct. Yeah, right.
And this from Clean Technica says figures from China Electric Council indicate non-fossil fuel sources of energy accounted for more than a quarter of the country's electric generation in 2014. China's total generation reached 5,550 terawatt hours in 2014.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. It's about 1,000. It's about 1,000 times as much as Vermont uses.
Yep.
Non-fossil fuel generation was 1,420 terawatt hours, rising to 19.6% year on year. I'm not sure how that's more than a quarter, but you never can tell. There's some way you can do that, I guess. And our next item, do you have something for that?
Well, I got it up there.
Oh, you got it up there.
Yeah.
What is it that we're looking at? I don't have my glasses.
Non-fossil fuel sources provide 25% of China's electricity. And there's a picture of solar panels in China.
Oh, it rose 19.6% year on year. That's why it wasn't yeah, so it's a quarter. Absolutely. Okay, good. I understand perfectly. I learn a lot during
they're talking about is, the first one is the total energy used.
Yes.
The second one is the capacity.
I feel very ignorant.
450 gigawatts. That's significant too.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so should we go on?
Well, there's just two more things here.
Oh, two more things.
2014, total investment in wind power surpassed spending in solar power.
Yes.
Conventional power plants and nuclear power
Put
total
together.
for the first time in history.
Yeah.
So
In China.
They're moving in
And
that
you know
direction.
what's going to happen? This is something that people in this country might think about. 20 years from now, the Chinese are going to be predominantly fueled by renewable power, and it's going to cost them, their marginal cost of producing electricity is going to be
very, very,
very
low.
low. Yeah. Meanwhile, the United States, if we keep going the way that we are, is going to be still tied to fossil fuels, and they are going to be producing things using energy that is less expensive than the energy that we're using.
Well,
and the only saving grace in this is going to be that because they're going to be more prosperous, their workers will be paid more. So their products may not...
Don't count on that. But we're going to be talking a little bit about the utilities later. And, we'll get there, but they're on the wrong track. And,
some of them are.
Well, the ones we're going to be talking about are.
The ones we're talking about are, actually there's one that we're going to be talking about, which I think is not, but we'll get to that too. Okay.
Well, just a takeaway here, despite the addition of 5 new nuclear reactors in China last year, their investment in nuclear power fell by 14%. So they're taking stuff offline.
Okay.
Gotta be.
Yeah.
Moving right along.
Moving right along. NPR brought us this. Nicaragua produces no oil, but is a land of fierce winds, tropical sun, and rumbling volcanoes. In other words, it is a renewable energy paradise. Now, it's moving quickly to become a green energy powerhouse, and the vast majority of Nicaragua's electricity will come from hydroelectric, geothermal, and wind.
Geothermal is going to be a biggie down there. They have a lot of volcanoes.
They do indeed, and they are getting help from the people who know about how to get energy from volcanoes. And
Oh, they do. I got some pictures
people in
here
Iceland.
from Nicaragua.
You know, Iceland gets
Oh yeah, everything.
like 100% of their electricity and their heat from deep geothermal. Yeah, go ahead.
So we got a picture of a wind farm.
Yep.
And there's all the cattle that's disturbing. You know, they really look upset.
Well,
underneath that is a very nice looking solar panel.
Yep.
Solar array. It's a pretty big one.
Which was one of the things that they didn't mention as one of the three. They said hydroelectric, geothermal, and wind, and of course, obviously, solar is also going to be included.
Well, this article mentions that they got a wind park that's at the end of a lake, so
yes.
it gets wind all the time.
Yes.
It's a very, very fortuitous location.
Yeah.
The final picture there is interesting because it's a geothermal plant.
Yes.
And you can't see much of what's going on. All you see is a whole bunch of pipes.
Yep.
But the interesting thing is they're coming out of the ground.
Yep. And you know, I should mention this because people get confused. The term geothermal is used for two different purposes. One of which is geothermal electric production, which can be combined heat and power. So you can get both from the same plant. But the other is geothermal heating, which is used commonly in Vermont in conjunction with heat pumps. And the two of them are, aside from the fact that they're getting their heat from the ground.
We're getting the heat from the earth.
Yeah, but
geothermal.
Aside from that, they're very different.
Oh yeah.
Because the geothermal that is getting power goes very deep in many places, or
it's
at least
about a mile. In this case,
yeah.
In this case, it's about a mile.
Yep. Okay. Our next item is from the Detroit News, and it says, what Michigan's staunch conservatives want is a commitment to continue moving power production to green sources such as wind and solar at a rate of 1 to 1.5% per year, encouragement of microgrids powered by solar panels and windmills, and a reduction in reliance on out-of-state fuel sources, namely coal.
Well, this is a very interesting development because it's happening in other places than Michigan as well.
Yes.
People who might be ideologically opposed to renewables are turning around and saying, hey, you know, that's going to save me money.
Yes, that's right. And as a matter of fact,
and they're coming around.
People who are ideologically opposed to renewables are very often ideologically opposed to renewables because the renewables are being opposed by people who are very self-interested but align themselves ideologically with conservatives. My
friends are my friends.
That's right. So you've got large organizations like Koch Industries, which are putting huge amounts of money into advertising, channeling it through, in some cases, operations like the Heritage Foundation, which is giving money to congressional election campaigns and putting money into media. And what they're doing is they're saying, close the renewables down because Koch Industries needs to sell its coal.
Well,
and so the advertising agents that they've got who know how to move people, know how to speak the speak that conservatives speak, and they are moving a lot of conservatives. But what's happening is, in places like Michigan and other places, people are starting to realize that there really is no ideological reason, not a real ideological reason.
Not really. It's politics.
It's politics based on
economics.
Greed. Yeah. It's greed.
Well, it's greed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. This guy up there is one of them, you know, and he's talking. He made a statement here. No, it was Reagan made the statement. What is a conservative but one who conserves?
Yes.
Interesting point.
Yes. Yep. Okay. Now this is an interesting one. As part of the U.S. Solar Market Insight 2014 Year in Review report, the authors provide national solar PV pricing, and the system costs fell 9 to 12% over the course of 2014, depending on the market segment. Total costs for utility scale and large commercial scale systems fell below $2 per watt DC. That's from Clean
I don't
Technica.
have a reference on that. It sounds low.
It's low. what this means is, let's see, $2 a watt. When a Vermont consumer wants to buy into a solar farm, the price is going to be much closer to $4 a watt.
Okay.
And of course, because they're not in utility scale, they're in a very much smaller scale.
Smaller scale, right.
The people who are putting the thing up have got different ways of making money than the utilities do. But a year ago, it was $4 a watt, and it has fallen. So I've been hearing people say, well, it's below $4 a watt for that.
But this stuff is floating around at 2.
At 2. Now, the Sunshot Initiative, which is from the US DOE, they're hoping to get it down to 1 by 2020.
This number we're bandying about here, this is how much you would have to invest to build something like
That's
that.
correct, yes.
So if it's $1 a watt, a gigawatt, it's $1 million.
A gigawatt would be, if it's $1 a watt, $1 billion.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
a megawatt solar farm at $2 a watt. A megawatt is small for utility scale, but
Yes.
say a 5 megawatt farm at that price for a utility would cost about $10 million.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be, it would be something that would.
People are investing in it. At
People
that
are
level,
investing
so.
in it at that level, and it compares. Perhaps it compares with. Well, you can compare it to other things. Nuclear is $8 a watt, perhaps.
It's up to 8 now, huh?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, it's hard to know what it is in the United States because it's been so long.
It's subsidized.
But if you look at the Hinkley plant.
Yeah.
That's 3,200 megawatts, which is about 5 times the size of Vermont Yankee.
Okay.
And it's costing $40 billion. So that's way up above $10 a watt. Mm-hmm. And $8 a watt is pretty conservative.
It may wind up not even being built.
Oh, I don't think that's going to be built. I think that's just a disaster. Because, I mean, again, the government of the UK had to price it had to agree to a price of $26 billion. In order to get that, they had to guarantee that the plant could sell its electricity for twice the going rate for 30 years. In order to find an investor on that deal, they had to go outside of the UK. Then they couldn't find one in Europe, so they went to China. And that's how desperate they were to get that plant built. Now, why are they doing that? It isn't to save the consumers money. I think that's fairly certain.
Okay, I think I'll buy that. So who's behind this?
I don't.
The
Well,
Queen?
it's the government. No, not the Queen. The Queen is definitely in favor of renewable power.
Uh-huh.
The Queen was the one who was behind the Archimedes screw turbines at Windsor Castle.
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
And Prince Charles, absolutely the same thing. The Duchy of, there's it's Duchy something, cookies and stuff that you can actually buy at the Brattleboro Co-op, and he's behind the fact that the farmers in the Duchy of Cornwall, which is not identical to the county of Cornwall, it's all over western England, and Cornwall, which I don't count as part of England because I happen to be too Celtic to do that. The Duchy of Cornwall, the farmers are all operating organically, and so they've got much more money than they ever had in the past.
I just put a couple of graphs up there. We'll touch them real quickly. The first one shows the non-residential rooftop turnkey PV system installed costs.
Yes.
Over the year 2014.
Yes.
And they're dropping steadily.
Yes.
They're dropping quite steadily.
Yeah.
And then on the right, we're talking about utility scale turnkey.
Right.
Okay, and they're also all below $2.
Yeah.
They're all low.
Yeah.
And this is, of course, all over 2014. It's
Yeah.
only one year.
Yeah.
But this is different economics than we've seen.
It is indeed, and I know people who put in PVs that were, I think, well in excess of $20 a watt. 10 times what
it
we've
wasn't
done.
very long ago that was the going rate.
Yeah,
that
that's
was
right.
the going price.
Yep.
These were first adapters. These were people who lived off the grid. They had no
Yep.
choice.
Yes,
well, they had
that's
a
right.
choice. Yeah, pay the utility $80,000 to put to run power lines to their
For
house.
Nancy Ray Mallory, it was $30,000 for a 3.5 kilowatt PV system plus batteries, which was years ago.
$30,000.
Yeah, or it was
How
the
long
same
ago
amount.
was that?
I think it was 10 years ago.
Okay, that
And-
sounds about right.
And it was the same amount of money to put in utility power. But the
utility
thing
poles.
is, her power is more reliable than the utility power.
Is it really?
Yeah, she has run her generator once in the last 3 years.
Okay, so she must have pretty good storage too.
She's got good storage,
Yeah.
and in addition to that, she's in a passive solar house, so she has no heating bill to speak of.
Okay.
She uses a tiny amount of propane.
This is kind of the way of the future. Really.
I think it is. Yeah. Okay.
Moving right along.
CNews Renewables on Friday, March 13th, Friday the 13th, tells us that Uruguay's wind power output jumped 432.9% to over 700 gigawatt hours last year from the year previous. Driven by the installation of new plants, the local power market administrator said this in his annual report. Excluding hydroelectricity, renewable energy supplies more than doubled year on year to 1,364 gigawatt hours and covered 13.2% of the demand of the country.
So 13% is wind power.
13%
of the demand.
is renewables excluding hydropower. But most of that is wind
Okay.
power. Yeah. Yeah.
And they're now self-sufficient in electricity. The country has imported no power for the last 2 years.
Yeah, much to the dismay of people who would like to export it to them. But, that means that they're keeping their money in their borders rather than shipping it elsewhere like we do in this country. Next item, Breaking Energy tells us that in a refresh of its 2008 Wind Vision report, the DOE said wind industry had demonstrated an ability to scale up and drive down costs, avoiding causing grid disruptions, and not to be too big of a pain in the neck to critters or communities.
Avoid causing grid.
It would avoid
causing
grid disruptions and not be too big of a pain in the neck.
To critters, that's
To
important.
critters or communities. I think that critters probably includes plants, making 35% of the electricity in this country by 2050, an ambitious but feasible deployment scenario.
Well, if you look at that graph there, it shows a steady growth in all sorts of renewables, and it's projecting it out to 2050.
Yep.
But
Now-
it's a steady upward.
Yeah, now I want to point out here, the DOE has many departments, and the Energy Information Administration is one of them. This did not come from the Energy Information Administration, which also makes projections and says that 14% of our power will come from renewables in 2040. I'm sorry, it's probably 15% now. They generally project for 25 years hence an amount of energy that is probably achieved within 8 months of the time they project it. And the reason is because they are required by some rule or policy or something, law, to act on the idea that Congress will never do anything.
Which may be accurate.
No, well, Congress, in some people's opinions, does too much. But, basically we know that Congress is constantly fiddling with all kinds of things, passing laws that perhaps we don't need, but nevertheless, it's always doing things. So we know that this system that they give is based on assumptions that are absolutely not correct. But anyway, what are you looking at there, Tom?
I was just looking at I'll bring it up. I'm just looking at what basically you're reading.
Oh, I see, okay.
And I did notice that the figures did not include health benefits,
Oh, well,
which, they're just conveniently forgetting, but they're real.
yes. And those, again, the figures on health benefits differ depending upon who you're listening to. But WHO says we're losing 7 million people a year worldwide to air pollution.
It's air pollution, yeah. We've heard that.
And I've read numbers of people in the United States ranging from about 25,000 people killed by fossil fuel and such what pollution, to up to about 375,000 people a year. So these are lives lost earlier than they should be.
Yeah.
People who have been
You
murdered.
don't think about that
People
kind
who have been murdered by.
Well, that's one way of looking at it.
One
A
way
little
of looking at it,
extreme,
yeah.
but,
Okay. Leelanau Township. I don't know how that's pronounced. Sorry.
Leelanau.
Leelanau?
I don't know. I have never been
Maybe
up
it
there.
is. Leelanau. I don't know. Township, Michigan.
There it is up in Michigan.
There it is.
Upper right. It's sort of the fingernail on the pinky of the hand.
Okay. I believe it. Is finalizing its renewable energy community plan as it moves to becoming 100% powered by wind and solar, with efficiency helping. It's one of a number of towns and cities that have done this or are in the process. And in the link to this article at the article at geoharvey.wordpress.com on this, which is Friday 13th, links to sustainablebusiness.com, and at that article you can find another link that takes you to a website that's devoted to places worldwide that are or are becoming 100% renewable.
Well, a quick takeaway from that article.
Yeah.
About 20 towns or cities in the U.S. are working toward the same goal, including Aspen, Colorado,
Yes,
Burlington, Vermont,
which is already there.
and they say it's already there, but too much reliance on big hydro, and that's wrong. Burlington produces most of its electricity from wood.
Burlington produces most of its own electricity too.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's not.
Well, they produce it all now.
I know they still have contracts from out of the area. They have wind contracts.
Burlington does.
Yeah.
I didn't think so.
At least I think it does. But I might be wrong on that.
Yeah.
Maybe you're right. But the thing is that Burlington is. I just yesterday finished writing a lengthy article. Lengthy, not all that long really, but it was a lengthy amount of time I spent on it.
Oh.
Writing an article on this for Green Energy Times, in which I looked at a bunch of communities, and Burlington claims to be the first city to be 100% renewable. Technically, it isn't. Technically, Greensburg, Kansas beat it to it, but Greensburg is not what most people would call a city. It has a population of 800.
Okay.
It's just technically a city. So going by one dictionary definition of city, Greensburg is a city, but going by another one, it isn't.
It's not.
And so Burlington actually has done this, and another city that's done it is Palo Alto, but Palo Alto did it a couple of weeks after Burlington did.
That's mentioned in this group, yeah.
And you hear about cities that are 100% renewable, Ithaca, New York,
Ithaca,
Scituate. These are cities that have their municipal structures 100% renewable, but it's not the
population
whole
isn't,
population.
yeah.
And there are other cities and towns and so forth that are going to 100% renewable. But I know that there's a town, I forget where it is in the upper Midwest, that went to 100% renewable years ago. And I think even before Greensburg,
It's
Kansas.
going to be happening more and more.
Think of it.
Just makes sense.
To say it's the first city that's 100% renewable doesn't make sense when you think about the fact that ancient Rome wasn't using fossil fuels. Well,
Well, they probably were. They were heating their houses with wood or something.
they were. That's not fossil fuels, but
No,
they
that's
did
right.
have
Yeah.
bitumen, which they
Yeah.
used for various purposes, but it was like at 0% of their heating.
Well, they weren't drilling for oil,
They
that's
used.
for sure.
They were not drilling for oil. They used charcoal in their braziers, but the charcoal was charcoal from wood.
It was wood, yeah.
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 Okay. We should move on.
Moving on to Saturday.
Saturday, March 14th, and from Climate Central, we hear the International Energy Agency announced Friday that energy-related CO2 emissions last year were unchanged from the year before, totaling 32.3 billion metric tons of
That doesn't
CO2.
sound as important as it is.
Yeah, in both 2013 and 2014, it shows that efforts to reduce emissions to combat climate change may be more effective than previously thought. What this means is the scientists in the world were expecting CO2 emissions to continue to increase year to year,
And
but they
flatlined.
didn't. They flatlined.
Yep.
Now we've still got
We're still more than we need to be.
We're far more than we should be, but it looks like the trend might start to be reversing, and we can actually point at reasons why, and we will get to that in time. Okay, the next item, Clean Technica. NRG is the biggest privately owned centralized generator in the United States with large nuclear, coal, and gas assets in a 50 gigawatt portfolio that nearly matches the size of Australia's entire electric grid. Its CEO forecasts what he calls a tsunami
And there's the CEO up there.
Yep, of closing polluting coal plants and uncompetitive nuclear to be replaced by renewables. That from Clean Technica.
The headline I have is The Future of Energy Explained in 70 Seconds.
Yes.
But it's NRG CEO, who you see up there.
Yep.
And I guess we got 70 seconds to say it, because he says a lot in a few words.
Yeah.
Our industry is in the early but unmistakable stage of a technology-driven disruption of historic proportion.
Right.
This disruption ultimately is going to end in a radically transformed energy industry. He's right on the money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where the winners are going to be those who offer their customers, whether they be commercial, industrial, or individual, a seamless energy solution that is safer, cleaner, more reliable, more convenient, and increasingly wireless.
Wireless.
That's what he's talking about.
Cool.
Yep.
Interesting.
I'd like to know more about that one.
Yeah.
I might add, he's talking now, just generally more personalized than what is currently being offered to energy consumers through our current command and control centralized one-fits-all wire and wooden pole system invented by Thomas Edison and seemingly last improved upon in his era. We believe that the future eventually will belong to demand-driven, decentralized models of service that empower individual consumers through sustainable energy solutions that are affordable, personalized, convenient, and reliable.
Well, there you go.
He says it well.
He says it right, absolutely. And you know, I think he took that as a page out of Mary Powell's book.
Well, she's up there with him. These two guys are leading the pack here.
I think he's up there with her. I think she got there first.
Yeah.
Mary Powell, of course, being the CEO of Green Mountain
Power seems to be doing things right.
Yeah. So may it continue to do so.
Wire and wooden poles. She calls it sticks and thread.
Sticks and thread.
Sticks and string. Sorry.
Sticks and string. Good for her. Okay. Our next item is from Daily Detroit. Michigan must set and attainable energy goals and look toward renewable energy sources to keep energy prices down and avoid widespread outages. Governor Rick Snyder said in a special energy message. The state's new goal is to get 30% to 40% of its energy from renewable sources and reduce waste by 2025. That's not that far in the future.
Not at all. Not at all.
So there he is.
Think about how long ago was 2005.
Oh, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, wasn't it?
But 2025, yeah, 2025 is the day after tomorrow.
Now, he's a Republican, and he's got a Republican legislature behind him, and they're moving.
That's right. Well, we were talking about conservatives in Michigan
they're starting to look at things a little bit differently.
And as a matter of fact, conservatives in other places too. I mean, when the Republican presidential candidates went to Iowa, the first thing that they were confronted with was farmers and other Iowa businessmen who were saying, "Wait a minute here.
We want wind.
We want wind. We want ethanol." And
they want ethanol.
They want ethanol, and I happen to be opposed to the idea of having ethanol mixed with gasoline. I think there are better solutions.
You've got a valid reason.
Well, yeah, it was because you put 10% ethanol into the gasoline, and my Prius performance was. Yeah. I lost 10% of my mileage. So what did it get me? It got me nothing except for higher costs. It didn't do anything for the environment.
Well, I think it was a wet kiss to the industry.
Yeah.
Big Ag got, they made a lot of money out of it.
Yeah, they made it. But hopefully what's going to happen is that they're going to have different approaches that they can take that will use possibly even the same fields to produce different products because corn is so destructive to the
corn
soil.
is not the best thing to grow at all.
But they can grow perennial switchgrass and things like that.
Switchgrass is good. Hemp is good.
Hemp is great.
Willow is good.
Willow is good. And these sources can be turned into other things, other chemicals that can also be blended with gasoline if that's
Correct.
what you want.
Well, you talked about butanol.
Butanol, yeah. And I think it's a better approach. It's apparently a cheaper approach. It has to overcome inertia to get installed. However,
well, we get different forces moving toward this.
Yeah.
We got certain investors versus other investors.
Right.
And, we'll
Yeah.
see how it shakes out.
We'll see how it shakes out.
Ultimately, we're all going to benefit, but that ultimately could be a long time.
yeah, hopefully not too long. Sunday, March 15th, from the Energy Collective, we have this. Traditionally,
Here comes the sun.
The electricity grid has relied on dirty peaker plants to balance the grid during periods when electricity demand exceeds supply. Now, technology is available today that can help fill the gap of these peaker plants. The technology is also known as demand-side resources.
Which include energy efficiency,
Duh.
demand response, which is all electronics, but
Yeah.
balancing the demand with the load,
Yeah,
distributed generation like rooftop solar,
right.
energy storage, including electric vehicle batteries,
Yeah.
which is going to be a big thing when there's enough electric vehicles.
Oh, yes.
And then a smart grid, which utilizes technologies like two-way programmable thermostats.
Right.
So
Everyone.
they can, with your permission, they can control your thermostat,
Right.
but with your permission.
With your permission.
But they're going to
Which you would
to
give them. Yeah,
permission.
because it would save you money. And they can control your thermostat so that when you're not home, it gets turned down.
Yeah, right. Turn it down before you come home from
So
work. Turn it up again.
it's not Big Brother getting into your bedroom.
Yeah, a couple more. This one I don't understand really. Water energy measures, which address the effect of water use on energy use. Well, it's
There's a
real,
lot
but
of-
nobody thinks about the connection.
Yeah.
And then finally, strategic energy rate design, such as time of use pricing. Okay.
Right. And that's
You can
something
dry
that's,
your clothes in the afternoon
Absolutely.
and pay full price, so you can dry your clothes at 4 o'clock in the morning and get a break.
yeah.
And you're going to be sleeping at 4 o'clock in
Yeah.
the morning, but that doesn't affect the clothes drying.
that kind of
kind of
pricing has
stuff.
been around for a long time. I had that when I was living in Massachusetts.
But it's not universal.
It's not universal, and in fact, one of the problems that I had was that the system that I had was powered by electricity. So the system of the timer. So, the time that I was getting my electricity for a lower price kept getting bumped every time there was any kind of outage. And,
Yeah.
so, and technically.
You weren't thinking about resetting the clock.
No, and technically, I was not supposed to go fooling around with that meter, but every once in a while I'd find
have
that
to.
you really have to, or whatever. And they never complained that I did, because they always knew why I did, I think. Anyway, where are we now? We are on
Egypt.
Egypt, yes. The second day of Egypt's Economic Development Conference saw the country sign agreements of memoranda and understanding with international companies worth $158 billion. $158 billion.
Well,
Egypt?
There's some biggies getting involved.
Yeah, most.
I'll mention some of them.
Okay, go ahead.
China's state grid, which is the government.
Yes.
Okay. Siemens, which is a giant German industrial, and it's private. Siemens is not the government.
Yep.
Saudi Arabia. Well, it's Saudi Arabia-based power and water project developer, Aqua Power. I don't know who they are, but
Yeah.
they're probably not owned by the government, but they might be owned by the king's relatives.
I think they probably are. From what I understand, the king's got about 10,000 relatives.
Well,
who
there's a lot of princes, but
Yeah.
being a prince in Saudi Arabia means nothing. You've got to be a royal prince.
Aha! Okay, now I understand.
So the Emirates are also getting involved. British Petroleum, which is a giant company, they're getting involved. More Emirates. Pepsi-Cola is getting involved.
Good for them.
The Islamic Development Bank, which is a multinational thing.
Wherever Pepsi go, Islamic Development Bank follows. I'm saying something idiotic there, so please forgive me.
Well, when I was in Saudi Arabia, they had Pepsi-Cola all over the place.
Yeah.
And they had eliminated Coca-Cola because Coca opened a plant in Israel. So they
yes.
nationalized the plant and shut it down.
That's why it is.
It became Khaki Cola.
Khaki Cola.
Same logo. Or almost the same logo.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, crazy.
Well, you know, this is the way the world works. People have got their opinions. Okay.
Oh, this one's interesting because we've already kind of touched on this from the other side.
The one...
Sensing a threat, utilities put a squeeze on solar roof industry.
Yes, 3 years ago, the national top utility executives gathered at Colorado Resort to hear warnings that solar panels posed a grave new threat to operators of America's electric grid. Now, the industry and its fossil-fueled supporters are waging a determined campaign to stop a home solar insurgency. They are going to try to convince us that solar power on our rooftops is bad for us. Bad for our health. It'll prevent us from sleeping. They'll come up with
all sorts
solar
of stuff.
panel syndrome.
What they're doing now that has some meaning in some states
yes.
is they're putting surcharges on net metering.
Yeah, and they're explaining this with a campaign that sounds like it makes sense.
It's not about profits. It's about protecting customers.
That's right.
That's what they say.
You put a solar panel on your roof, and it means the guy next door has to pay more.
Right.
Which, you know...
Another takeaway here, the residential solar industry employs about 174,000 people nationwide, or twice as many as the number of coal miners.
Wow.
That's interesting.
I didn't realize the number of coal miners had fallen that far.
Well, they've closed a lot of coal mines.
They sure have. Now you know why Koch Industries is upset.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And I wonder how
they know what's going on.
I wonder how leveraged those guys are, because Koch Industries is not publicly traded.
No, it's totally private. So
which means
you don't know what's going on.
They can't sell their interests.
Well, I guess they could with each of the brothers' permission or something like that.
Well, they could sell them,
yeah.
but you know, I mean, that means that they'd
have to go public.
Or find investors who are willing to invest in something that's not publicly traded.
Yeah.
They are boxed in to their investments. This is a very difficult situation to get out of. And if their investments are declining, they are in serious trouble.
Well, they got enough money to weather a storm.
You know what? I think back to the Hunt brothers, who were trying so hard to... Yeah. They put $5 billion into trying to corner the silver market.
And they lost it all.
They lost it all.
But that was a cabal against them. The banking industry realized what was going on, and they decided to put them out of business.
The Hunt brothers?
Yeah.
Well, you can think that if you want, but I think that it was... I think that they...
It was just a bubble that blew up?
I think they created a bubble and then it blew up in their face.
Well, I think
I remember
they got
when that
ganged up on.
I remember when that happened, because the price of silver was going through the roof.
Oh, it was going through the roof, yeah, and all of a sudden...
I had an old collection of quarters, U.S. quarters, and they had no
numismatic
value.
Or no, just junk, they call it junk silver.
It was numismatic, but it was just junky numismatic.
Oh, okay.
It was low grade. It was all in what numismatists call good condition or very good condition, which is pretty bad.
They weren't really collectibles.
They were not collectibles.
Maybe for a high school kid.
And I sold those quarters for $10 a piece.
Did you really?
Yeah. And so, you know, anyway, should we go on from there?
Well, today's price, they'd be worth about $5 a piece.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just for the metal content.
Just for the metal content. Yeah, but this was 30 years ago. During that bubble, and the you know what it was? The problem that the Hunt brothers had was that every time they drove the price of silver up, and I know this because I knew people who were in the mining industry at the time.
Yeah.
Every time the price of silver went up, more mines would open.
Okay.
So the production of silver went up in a way that was matching the price.
Yeah.
So the Hunt brothers could not corner the market. There was no feasible way to corner the market.
Because the market was growing faster.
Because the market was growing as fast as they could drive it up. And so eventually they just ran out of money. And when they did, they were so leveraged into silver futures that they lost literally everything, including their business suits and their watches and so forth.
They lost their watches.
They lost their watches. They had to retire on Social Security. They were impoverished at the end of that.
That's interesting.
And you know, it's, I don't know, I guess I could make a comment about people getting what they deserve, but people don't always get what they deserve, and I don't know what they deserved. So anyway, okay.
This is a good one coming up.
What's that? China's natural?
China introduces 70% solar subsidy for the poor.
Yeah. Monday, March 16th, China's National Energy Administration released its general outline for the Solar Power Disadvantaged Support Implementation Plan. You know, they liked long titles, I think, which envisions a raft of policy measures for expediting the deployment of solar power in disadvantaged communities, including subsidies of up to 70% for poor people.
It's interesting here because half of that money is coming from the community, the other half is coming from the government,
okay.
the national government.
So they're making the poor communities pay for it.
Well, half of it.
Half of it.
Yeah.
That's kind of them. Okay. And
basically, one of the things they're doing is supporting the disadvantaged, they call it.
Yes, of course.
In putting solar on their roof.
Yeah, and which I think is a reasonable thing to do.
And they're giving them good rates on long range
absolutely.
loans.
Absolutely.
So they're doing things right.
Yeah. Okay. Punjab's hardworking farmers can look forward to the end of some of their power cut woes, with the state government planning to launch soon a farm-level solar power generation scheme. The new and renewable energy minister said farmers will be allowed to set up solar power plants of 1 to 2.5 megawatts. This is from SME Times.
A little bit of interest. I wanted to know a little bit more about Punjab, so I looked them up, you know, because I've heard the name, you know, Punjabis and stuff like that. They're in the very north of India.
Yes.
India comes to a point. They're almost at the top of the point.
Yep.
But not quite.
Not quite.
And on their left, more west, I guess, is Pakistan.
Yes.
And that part of Pakistan is also called Punjab.
Okay.
Which means 5 rivers.
Okay.
And for the longest time, it's been a very, very fertile place.
Yes.
And according to the article right now, it's producing half of the grain used by all of India.
Wow.
And it's the smallest state in India. It's India's Rhode Island.
Yeah. Interesting.
That's interesting. And the picture up there is not Punjab, it's California.
Yes. Is Punjab, is Amritsar the capital of Punjab?
I don't remember, but it might be.
Yeah.
I think it is.
Okay.
But it's way up there, and it's...
That's where the Golden Temple is.
The farmers are king in Punjab.
Yes.
And this is a...
You know where you can get a good picture of that? The area of Amritsar, which I believe is in Punjab.
I think you're right.
There was a movie that came out a number of years ago. It was a Bollywood movie that was circulated widely in the United States called Bride and Prejudice. And it was about a rich American who goes to India and falls in love with an Indian girl.
Uh-huh.
And it's based on Pride and Prejudice, and even the names are similar. You know, but
Bride and Prejudice.
Bride and Prejudice, and it has the Lalita, who is is it Lalita? No, it's not. Yeah, I guess it is. The girl who is the equivalent of Lizzie Bennett, the heroine of Pride and Prejudice, is the first time you see her, she's out on a tractor in the fields, you know, and her father gets his income from
he's a farmer,
farming.
Yeah.
Although he lives in the city. Okay, we should go on.
Why not?
Why not? Okay. The government of Egypt inked two pacts for the construction of 5 gigawatts of solar parks in the country. Canadian solar firm Sky Power and Gulf Development Companies will build a 3 gigawatt PV facility. Bahrain-based Terra Sola Group And Terra Nix involves the construction of a 2 gigawatt solar complex. This from CNews Renewables.
Well, we sort of touched on this.
We did
a little while ago.
Yeah, this is kind of a clarification or an expansion.
Elaboration.
Elaboration. That's
Yep,
a good word.
yep.
On what we had talked about before.
Well, they're currently generating 12% of their power by renewables.
Wow.
They want to generate at least 20% by 2020,
Yeah.
which is pretty soon. So
Yeah.
they're going to have to put these things into motion pretty
Yeah.
quickly.
They don't have
Which-
a lot of oil in Egypt,
I don't think they do.
and
I don't think they do.
they have a country that is in some ways very different from the countries around them. And they're the only country in that part of the world, aside from the one south of them, that have the Nile.
Yep.
They have 2 wonderfully beautiful Nile riverbanks, each of which supports quite a lot of agriculture.
I'm sure.
Okay, on Tuesday, March 17th, we got this from New Kerala. The $850 billion Norwegian government pension fund has sold the majority of its shares in companies exposed to the Indian coal sector, citing financial and environmental risks inherent in their operations. The fund has also sold shares in U.S. and European companies similarly exposed to the coal sector.
Yeah, well, a couple of things here. First of all, this Norwegian government pension fund,
Yeah,
it's large.
it's the biggest
It's
retirement
the world's
fund in the
largest
world.
sovereign wealth fund.
Yeah.
And basically the Norwegian government's been taking revenues from the oil
Yes,
and putting it in trust for the Norwegian people.
right. Right.
And it's worked pretty well.
Interesting idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
That the people should benefit from the oil. Well, goodness, that's socialism. Can't do that.
Can't do that, no.
Yeah. Okay. The next one is new work from Carnegie's Rebecca Hernandez, Madison Hofecker, and Chris Field found that the amount of energy that could be generated from solar equipment constructed on or around existing infrastructure in California, that's important, on or around existing infrastructure.
Well, that's what this article is all about.
Yeah.
It's about utilizing the infrastructure.
The infrastructure that's already there would exceed the state's demand by up to 5 times. This is from laboratory equipment.
Picture of a nice solar
Yeah.
array there,
Isn't that
which,
nice?
which is in Spain, not in California.
Well, you know, this. It's,
Well, there is a link because these same people that you just mentioned were involved in that Spanish field too.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, breaking energy.
I'll get you the last sentence here.
Oh,
This
okay,
is a
good.
one. The team's work shows that it's possible to substantially increase the fraction of California's energy needs met by solar without converting natural habitat and causing adverse environmental impact, and without moving solar installations to locations remote from the consumers.
Yes,
So they're saying, let's put them in an optimum place and really look at it.
yes.
So they're,
You know what this reminds me of, though, is the U.S. DOE did estimates of the amount that could be produced in various places from various power sources.
yeah,
And their estimate for the amount of power that Vermont could get from its available space that it could use for solar power was about 1,000%.
was it really?
Yeah. And they broke that down into rooftop,
Yeah.
which was,
isn't disturbing anybody.
yeah. And then there was a separate category, which was urban non-rooftop. And if you think about it, some of that would really be beneficial in general. For
Well,
example,
there's
you can
urban
put,
stuff that isn't being used for much.
right, you can put a solar canopy above a parking lot.
Bingo.
You
Great
know,
idea, and it's coming.
and it's coming.
Yeah.
And you know, this, what it does is, aside from the fact that it produces electricity, it also shields the cars
Protects the car.
from the sun's rays. So it helps the paint on the cars last. Okay. Breaking Energy tells us U.S. solar giant SolarCity today being the Monday, I guess, announced the launch of a microgrid product with built-in energy storage capacity. SolarCity is going after the commercial market, targeting municipalities which is a segment the company views as underserved. The one reason to have municipal microgrids is extreme weather. I've been pushing for these things.
Extreme weather events,
Yeah,
which have been increasingly disruptive for municipalities.
that's right.
And it mentioned a couple of hurricanes.
Okay, specifically our friends Sandy and Irene.
Yep.
And of course also Katrina and a few others.
Picture up there is the CEO of Solar City, which is Lyndon Reeve.
Yep.
And he just happens to be Elon Musk's cousin.
Yes, and Elon Musk happens to be on the board of Solar City.
Yeah, yeah. One of the articles that I read said they're joined at the hip,
Yes.
and they have the utilities terrified.
I believe it. Yeah.
But Solar City is as large as the next 10 largest solar developers.
Okay.
Solar City is a big company. They employ 6,000 people.
Yeah. And if you think about the flip side of that, Tesla is producing batteries.
Bingo.
Wonder why. And of course they're doing it for both their cars and for Solar City. And Tesla has got, I don't know what their current market value is, but it's similar to that. It's probably half of that, roughly, very roughly, of General Motors.
I was thinking this guy is the General Motors of solar.
Oh yeah,
and Tesla is the Ford of the 21st century.
Yes, you know,
the Henry Ford.
We're looking at a you know, things are changing, and the people who have been around watching are not happy about it. And General Motors, by the way, is converting to electric cars, just like the other car companies that are.
I just read Audi was. I just read that Audi is
yeah.
converting.
Okay, are we moving on?
Well, I'm just going to look real quick.
Okay.
These guys have been putting in microgrids in limited locations like campuses, like military installations.
Yep.
And they've learned the technology.
Right.
So now they're spreading out to a new market, which would be municipalities.
And by the way, those microgrids at military bases, any military base that has any need for power when the power goes out, it's got a microgrid. This is old.
Absolutely.
These have
and
been
they've
around
had that for a long time.
For a long
just for
time.
security purposes.
Yeah, for security purposes. But they're serving them as a kind of a model for some municipalities. Okay. Next, Wednesday, March 18th, scientists have raised concerns about a large, rapidly thinning glacier in Antarctica, warning that it could contribute significantly to rising sea levels. They say they're discovering two openings that would channel warm water to the base of the huge Totten Glacier and bring threat of potentially disastrous melting. This is from CNN. This is
kind of scary.
And they're saying, I read today, that the report these guys have produced, or that the people who produced the report have told the news, they believe that one glacier melting could produce a sea rise of 11 feet.
I got it right here. Same number, 11 feet.
11 feet. Yep. And that, you know, this, I don't know how much of that glacier, one thing that people should understand about those glaciers is that a glacier on a hillside is not, you know, it's got water in it that's not in the ocean.
So when
but if it breaks up and falls into the ocean as ice, that raises the ocean level.
Yeah, just by doing that.
Just by doing that. It doesn't have to all melt.
You put an ice cube in your drink.
Yes.
Drink goes up.
Right. It doesn't have to all melt.
The same physics.
And we could have large pieces of this stuff falling into the ocean, and if that happens, the ocean level is going to rise.
It's not going to raise the ocean level 18 feet at once.
No.
What's going to happen is the tide's going to be going in a little, maybe an inch,
a little bit, a little bit.
a little bit more.
Yep.
And the next thing you know, half of New York City's underwater.
Well, they're saying that it'll take decades.
Oh, it will. Oh, definitely.
But what I'm saying is this business of glaciers migrate, they move, they fall apart. Glaciers falling apart and moving into the water could make this thing happen faster.
Sure.
Yeah. Now, I've got two reports coming up here that I think are really interesting. One of them is from Clean Technica. New polling numbers from Britain's YouGov have found that 71% of Scottish adults are in favor of continued development of wind power as part of the country's energy mix, a number that has increased from 64% 2 years earlier. This is a big increase in the course of 2 years. Wind power produced 146% of Scottish household needs in January of this year. Now, that combination of facts is a thing that I find particularly interesting, because what's been happening is wind power has been burgeoning in Scotland. And the people in Scotland are getting more and more accustomed to the effects of wind power being around them. And those effects are encouraging them to go further down that road to wind power.
I think that's exactly what's going on.
And
not only do the vast majority of Scots support wind power, but the number who do so is actually increasing.
Increasing, exactly. So, we're back to this thing of, I called the town offices, the city hall of Greensburg, Kansas, and said, does anybody complain about wind power in Greensburg?
Did you?
I did,
Yeah.
yeah. And the lady who answered the phone said, complain? If they had, they would have got me, but I haven't heard it, but I'll ask.
That's interesting.
And basically what I learned was they think living in a city of 1,000 acres with 15 wind turbines in it,
yeah,
they think that the whole idea of human health being hurt by wind turbines is a comedy act. They just think
it's not a comedy.
Yeah, they think it's very funny that anybody would think that's true. And of course, when you look at places like the Roscoe Wind Farm, people live in there. Mm-hmm. Hundreds and hundreds of people live inside the Roscoe Wind Farm.
Doesn't seem to bug them too much.
Doesn't seem to bug them. In fact, it is extremely popular with them for reasons that are easy to understand.
Well, the takeaway from this article is we are often told by a vocal majority of objectors that Scots don't like wind power. But this poll shows there is absolutely no evidence to support this. In fact, it's quite the opposite.
Well, my daughter lives in Scotland.
Yeah, you've talked about that.
And she told me about going to Wales, and she said, Wales is just the loveliest country.
I bet it is.
She said that the hills in Wales are covered with sheep and wind turbines.
And the sheep don't mind.
The sheep don't mind. And this was not by any influence of, pro-wind influence of mine. This was just something that she came up with on her own. And the next item from Reuters Africa is this. China aims to install 17.8 gigawatts of solar power capacity this year.
This year. Yeah.
This year. Yeah. China's National Energy Administration said in a document posted on its website. This is up nearly 20% from the original plan of 15 gigawatts of installations and nearly 70% from the 10.52 gigawatts of solar generation added last year. The Chinese are putting in huge amounts of wind and huge amounts of solar. They're putting it in very, very fast. They are putting in a very small amount of nuclear, and they are reducing their consumption of coal. Mm-hmm. And the result of this is going to be, again, they're going to have very low energy bills. And they're going to be very competitive with the United States.
You mean in things like manufacturing?
In things like manufacturing. Yeah. And not because they're paying their people less. It's going to be because they are paying less for their energy. Unless we start opposing the idea of buying our energy for free.
Well, eventually that's going to have to happen because it just makes sense.
Yeah.
I've said it before, in the future people are going to look back and say, these people used to burn coal. Can you believe that?
What can you say?
What can you say? Can't say much. There's a picture of a nice solar rooftop panel on an industrial plant.
Where is it?
It's in China.
It's in China, yeah. Well, the Chinese have got large areas, very much like the United States has large areas where people don't live. And they're putting up wind farms in some of those areas and connecting them with the East Coast, which is highly populated.
I think this is the last item on the agenda.
It is indeed. And it happens coincidentally that we're just at the end of our broadcast.
2 minutes.
2 minutes, but we have to allow for the various editorial things that happen at the beginning and the end. Yes, so we should say goodbye.
Right. Well, let's get us both up here. So
Let's
we can
get us
say
both
goodbye.
up there so we can say goodbye. Goodbye, everyone. This
Goodbye.
is Tom Fennell, and I am George Harvey.
And I got the right hand again.
And we will be back. We shall return.
We spin and we toil, we work all day, sowing and reaping, we store goods away, so we can be dressed well on the day that we die. We dig and drill and waste what we find, break up the earth.